The excitement in the young boy's eyes was unmistakable as he walked through the airport terminal with his mom. This wasn't just any ordinary flight. It was his first time flying first class, a special reward for maintaining straight A's throughout the school year. His mother, a hard-working single parent who had saved for months to make this trip possible, couldn't help but smile seeing her son's joy. As they made their way down the jet bridge, the boy clutched his boarding pass tightly, occasionally glancing at the seat number with a grin. The first-class cabin felt like a different world to him. The seats were wider, the lighting was softer, and there was so much legroom. He politely waited for an elderly couple to store their bags before settling into his window seat, 2A. Everything was perfect until flight attendant Ms. Wilson appeared. There was something off about the way she looked at them from the moment they stepped into the cabin. While she greeted other passengers with a warm smile, her expression noticeably changed when she approached their row. She stood there, arms crossed, staring at their boarding passes as if trying to find a mistake. "These seats?" she asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. The boy's mother calmly handed over their tickets again, maintaining her composure despite the flight attendant's obvious rudeness. Other passengers were starting to notice the unusual scrutiny. "Is there a problem?" the mother asked quietly, trying to keep the situation from escalating. The flight attendant's lips tightened into a thin line as she examined their tickets for the third time. "We'll see," she replied curtly, before walking away to the galley, whispering something to another crew member while glancing back at them. The boy, who had been so excited just moments ago, now sat quietly in his seat, his earlier joy dimming. He pulled out his favorite science book, trying to focus on the chapters about space exploration instead of the uncomfortable atmosphere that had settled around them. A kind-looking businessman across the aisle seemed to pick up on the tension. He gave them a sympathetic smile and started a friendly conversation about the boys' book, helping to ease some of the awkwardness in the air. But Ms. Wilson wasn't done yet. She kept finding reasons to walk past their row, each time making a show of checking something or other. When the drink service began, Ms. Wilson served everyone in first class with practiced efficiency, everyone except their row. She repeatedly forgot their section, only returning after the boy's mother had to explicitly request service 3 times. Each time, the flight attendant's actions became more obviously discriminatory, catching the attention of several nearby passengers who exchanged concerned glances. The boy tried his best to remain positive, remembering what his mother had always taught him about staying strong in difficult situations. He sat up straight, kept his voice polite, and focused on his book. But anyone watching could see his small shoulders tensing every time Ms. Wilson passed by their seats. The situation was building towards something bigger. You could feel it in the air. Other passengers were starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats, some pulling out their phones, others watching the scene unfold with growing concern. Nobody knew it yet, but this flight was about to become much more than just a simple trip. It was about to turn into a powerful story about standing up against discrimination, one that would soon capture the nation's attention. The boy's mother reached over and squeezed his hand reassuringly, both of them unaware that the next few minutes would change not just their day, but would spark a conversation that would reach far beyond the confines of this aircraft. The boarding process continued, but the atmosphere in first class had shifted dramatically. Ms. Wilson, the flight attendant, seemed to have made it her personal mission to watch the young boy's every move. While other children in the cabin chatted freely with their parents or played with their tablets, any slight movement from him drew her immediate attention. When a young girl 2 rows ahead accidentally spilled her pre-flight water, Ms. Wilson rushed over with napkins and a warm smile, assuring the parents that these things happen. But when the boy reached into his backpack to get his water bottle, she immediately appeared at their row. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to make several passengers look up from their phones and magazines. "I'm just getting my water," the boy replied softly, his hand freezing halfway to his bag. His mother watched the interaction carefully, her face a mask of controlled calm that couldn't quite hide her growing concern. A businessman across the aisle, who had been observing the situation, cleared his throat loudly. "I don't see any problem here," he said firmly, making direct eye contact with Ms. Wilson. "The young man has been nothing but well-behaved." Other passengers nodded in agreement, but Ms. Wilson simply pressed her lips together and stalked back to the galley. The boy's mother leaned over and whispered words of encouragement to her son, who was trying his best to appear smaller in his seat. "Remember what we talked about," she said quietly. "You have every right to be here." A couple seated behind them overheard and exchanged knowing glances, the wife already typing something on her phone. As the final boarding announcements were made, Ms. Wilson made another appearance, this time with a clipboard in hand. She stood in the aisle, making a show of checking seat numbers against her list, but her attention remained fixed on their row. When the boy shifted in his seat to look out the window at the planes taking off, she immediately stepped closer. "Please remain still in your seat," she said loudly, as if addressing a troublemaker. The boy froze, his eyes wide with confusion. He hadn't done anything different from the other passengers who were settling in for the flight. The mother's hands tightened on her armrests, but she maintained her composure, years of experience having taught her the importance of staying calm in such situations. More passengers were now openly watching the scene unfold. A woman in a business suit across the aisle had set aside her laptop and was quietly recording the interaction on her phone. 2 rows up, an elderly couple whispered to each other, shaking their heads in disapproval at the flight attendant's behavior. The tension reached a new level when the boy's book slipped from his lap as he tried to put it in the seat pocket. Before he could pick it up, Ms. Wilson was there again. "That's disrupting other passengers," she announced, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. The absurdity of her statement was clear to everyone. The book had made barely a sound as it fell. The mother started to speak up, but before she could, 3 different passengers chimed in simultaneously. "He's done nothing wrong," came a voice from behind. "This is ridiculous," said another passenger. The businessman who had been watching everything unfold was now on his phone, apparently sending emails with rapid-fire intensity. What nobody realized yet was that Ms. Wilson's actions were about to backfire spectacularly. Every passing minute, more passengers were documenting her behavior, their phones capturing what would soon become viral evidence of discrimination at 30,000 feet. The story was building toward a climax that would not only change lives but would force an entire airline industry to face some uncomfortable truths about bias and accountability. As the final passengers boarded, the air in the first-class cabin was electric with tension. Ms. Wilson disappeared briefly into the galley, but everyone could sense that she wasn't done yet. The boy sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap, while his mother kept a protective eye on their surroundings. Neither of them knew that the worst, and ultimately the most important, part of their journey was just about to begin. The pre-flight safety demonstration was just finishing up when the young boy raised his hand politely, trying to get someone's attention. His throat was dry from the stress of the situation, and he really needed a sip of water. When Ms. Wilson walked by, deliberately ignoring him, another flight attendant noticed and started to approach with a kind smile. But before her colleague could reach their row, Ms. Wilson intercepted her. "I'll handle my section," she said sharply. She then turned to the boy, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Is there a problem here? Are you causing trouble again?" The boy's mother straightened in her seat, her patience finally wearing thin. "My son is simply asking for a glass of water," she stated firmly. "He hasn't caused any trouble, and you know it." The mother's voice was steady, but everyone could hear the controlled anger beneath her words. Several passengers nodded in agreement, and more phones came out to record what was happening. That's when Ms. Wilson made her fatal mistake. Drawing herself up to her full height, she declared loudly, "This child is being disruptive. I've observed multiple incidents of unruly behavior, and I'm going to have to ask you both to deplane." The cabin went completely silent for a moment before erupting in protest. "Are you kidding me?" The businessman across the aisle stood up. "I've been watching this whole time. The only person being disruptive is you." The elderly couple from row 3 joined in, the wife saying, "We've been flying first class for 30 years, and we've never seen such shameful behavior from a crew member." A woman in a crisp suit stood up, holding her phone steadily. "I'm an attorney with the Civil Rights Division," she announced clearly, "and I've been recording everything. This is a clear case of discrimination." The color drained from Ms. Wilson's face, but instead of backing down, she reached for her crew phone. "Security to first class," she called, her voice shaking slightly. "Unruly passengers in 2A and B." The boy looked at his mother, fear visible in his eyes for the first time. She took his hand, squeezing it reassuringly, while maintaining a dignified composure that impressed everyone watching. What happened next would later be viewed millions of times on social media. As airport security approached, 6 different passengers stood up simultaneously. The attorney spoke first. "I have video documentation of harassment going back to the moment they boarded." Another passenger chimed in, "We're all witnesses. This flight attendant has been targeting this child since the beginning." The boy, still holding his mother's hand, spoke up softly but clearly. "I just wanted some water," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet cabin. The simple truth of his statement, delivered with such innocent dignity, seemed to touch everyone who heard it. The security officers, taking in the scene and the numerous passengers speaking up, quickly realized this wasn't a typical security issue. One of them spoke quietly into his radio, and moments later, the lead flight attendant and the captain appeared in the cabin. As the situation was explained by multiple passengers, with video evidence readily available, the captain's face grew increasingly serious. He looked at Ms. Wilson, who was now starting to realize the gravity of her actions. The lead flight attendant was already on the phone with the airline's main office, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. The mother, maintaining her composure throughout, simply said, "All we want is to take our flight in peace, just like everyone else." Her dignity in the face of such treatment moved many passengers to tears. The boy, despite his ordeal, sat quietly, showing a maturity beyond his years. The captain made a decision. "Ms. Wilson," he said firmly, "please gather your belongings and come with me." As she was escorted off the plane, spontaneous applause broke out in the cabin. The lead flight attendant immediately brought water for both mother and son, apologizing profusely for their experience. What started as a simple request for water had turned into something much bigger, a moment of collective stand against injustice. The passengers, who had begun the flight as strangers, were now bonded by their shared experience of standing up for what was right. Nobody knew it yet, but this incident would become a turning point, not just for the airline, but for how such situations would be handled across the entire industry. By the time the plane landed at its destination, the videos had already gone viral. The first clip, posted by the business suit-wearing attorney, reached 1 million views within hours. More footage from different angles followed, each showing the shocking treatment the young boy and his mother had endured. Social media exploded with reactions. People shared their own similar experiences, turning what could have been a single incident into a national conversation about discrimination in the airline industry. The hashtag first-class passenger started trending, with thousands sharing stories of times they'd faced unfair treatment while flying. News vans were waiting at the arrival gate. The mother, still protecting her son's privacy, spoke briefly but powerfully to reporters. "This isn't just about us," she said, her voice steady. "It's about every child who's ever been made to feel they don't belong somewhere. We're speaking up so others won't have to go through this." The attorney who had recorded everything shared her professional perspective with major news networks. "What we witnessed today wasn't just poor customer service," she explained. "It was a clear case of discrimination that could have been much worse if passengers hadn't stepped up to document everything." The businessman who had supported them throughout the flight wrote a detailed LinkedIn post about the incident. His account of watching the subtle and then blatant discrimination unfold went viral in business circles, prompting discussions about corporate responsibility and training. Support poured in from unexpected places. A retired airline pilot with 40 years of experience wrote a powerful op-ed about the responsibility flight crews have to treat all passengers with respect. His insider perspective added weight to the growing debate about airline policies and training procedures. The elderly couple who had witnessed everything shared their story on a morning news show. "In all our years of flying," the wife said, her voice trembling with emotion, "we've never seen anything like it." But what touched us most was how that young boy handled himself with such dignity. Comment sections filled with people sharing similar experiences. "This happened to my nephew last month," wrote one user. "But nobody recorded it, so nothing was done." Another commented, "I've worked in aviation for 20 years, and these stories are more common than people think." The airline's social media team was overwhelmed with messages. People demanded answers, posted their own experiences, and called for systemic changes. The company's initial generic response only fueled the outrage, with many pointing out that corporate platitudes weren't enough anymore. Throughout all this, more videos from the flight continued to surface. Each new angle showed something important: the boy's perfect behavior, his mother's remarkable composure, the flight attendant's increasing hostility, and the way fellow passengers had united to stand against injustice. A pilots' union representative spoke out, emphasizing that such behavior went against everything airline crews are trained for. "Our job is to ensure passenger safety and comfort," he stated firmly. What happened on that flight represents a complete failure of those responsibilities. Civil rights organizations started reaching out to the family, offering support and legal assistance. They saw this incident as an opportunity to push for broader changes in airline policies and training procedures. The clear video evidence made it impossible for anyone to deny what had happened. The most powerful moment came when a group of flight attendants from other airlines posted an open letter condemning their colleagues' actions. "We serve all passengers equally," they wrote. "What happened on that flight dishonors our profession and everything we stand for." As the story spread, it became clear this incident would have lasting implications. It wasn't just about one flight attendant's actions anymore. It had become a catalyst for examining deeper issues in the airline industry and society at large. The public wasn't just angry, they were demanding real, measurable change. The airline's corporate headquarters was in chaos. Emergency meetings were called as executives gathered to address what had become the biggest PR crisis they'd faced in years. The CEO, who had cut short his vacation, demanded a full investigation into not just this incident, but all similar complaints from the past year. Inside a large conference room, airline officials reviewed footage from multiple angles. The plane's security cameras had captured everything from the moment the mother and son stepped aboard. Even more revealing were the pre-boarding gate cameras, which showed Ms. Wilson's behavior changing dramatically when she saw who would be sitting in first class. "Look at this," said the head of customer relations, pointing to earlier footage from that day. "She treated every other child in first class completely differently." They watched as she had happily helped a light-haired boy store his backpack and had cheerfully given another girl extra snacks before takeoff. The human resources team pulled Ms. Wilson's employment record. What they found was troubling. There had been several complaints filed against her over the past 2 years, but none had enough evidence to warrant serious action. Most had been dismissed as he said, she said situations. Now, with clear video evidence, these past complaints took on new meaning. "We found something else," the IT director announced during one meeting. "We cross-referenced passenger complaints with Ms. Wilson's flight schedules. The data showed a clear pattern. Numerous incidents involving passengers of color, particularly in premium cabins, but none had gathered enough attention to trigger a formal investigation." The airline's legal team worked through the night, reviewing every document and piece of evidence. They weren't just worried about this one incident, they were concerned about the possibility of a class action lawsuit if more passengers came forward with similar experiences. Flight crew members who had worked with Ms. Wilson started speaking up. "She always had comments about certain passengers," one colleague revealed. "We thought she was just picky about rules, but looking back." Their testimonies painted a picture of subtle discrimination that had gone unchecked for too long. The airline's training department was put under scrutiny too. "How did we miss this?" the head of training asked during a particularly tense meeting. "We need to completely overhaul our bias training program." They began reviewing training materials from other industries, looking for better ways to identify and prevent discriminatory behavior. Security footage from other flights was pulled and reviewed. In one video, Ms. Wilson could be seen making a family with 2 well-behaved children move from first class to coach, claiming their tickets were invalid. The tickets, the investigation revealed, had been perfectly valid. The customer service department had been working overtime, responding to thousands of messages from concerned customers. Many were sharing their own experiences, not just with this airline but with air travel in general. Each story added to the growing realization that this was a systemic issue that required systemic changes. The airline's reputation management team presented some alarming statistics. Their approval ratings had dropped significantly in just days. "We need to do more than just fire one flight attendant," the team leader explained. "We need to show real, meaningful change." Perhaps most telling were the interviews with other passengers from previous flights. Now that I think about it, one frequent flyer recalled, "I noticed she always seemed to give extra attention to certain passengers. Not in a good way. I just didn't want to cause trouble by saying anything." As the investigation continued, it became clear that this incident wasn't just about one bad employee. It had exposed gaps in training, reporting, and accountability throughout the entire airline industry. The question wasn't just what to do about Ms. Wilson anymore, but how to prevent similar incidents from ever happening again. The young boy's quiet dignity in the face of discrimination had unknowingly sparked a movement for change in an industry that desperately needed it. His mother's composure and the passengers' unity in standing up for what was right had created a moment that couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. 24 hours after the incident, Ms. Wilson sat in a stark conference room at the airline's headquarters, facing a panel of airline officials. Her usual confidence had vanished, replaced by nervous glances at the stack of evidence before them, printouts of social media posts, passenger complaints, and most damaging of all, screenshots from the viral videos. "We've reviewed all the footage," the head of HR began, her voice firm but professional. "Not just from yesterday's flight, but from your previous flights as well." Ms. Wilson shifted uncomfortably in her chair as they played a compilation of incidents that showed a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior. The airline's chief of operations spoke next. "We've received over 2,000 messages in the last day alone," he said, pushing forward a thick folder. "These aren't just about yesterday. People who flew with you months ago are coming forward with similar stories." Ms. Wilson tried to defend herself, claiming she was just following procedures, but the evidence was overwhelming. The videos clearly showed her treating passengers differently based on their appearance. Her voice grew increasingly desperate as she realized her career of 15 years was crumbling before her eyes. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, the airline's PR team was preparing a public statement. They knew a simple firing wouldn't be enough. People were demanding real change. The CEO himself had insisted on addressing this personally, understanding that this moment could either destroy or strengthen their company's reputation. Back in the conference room, Ms. Wilson received the news of her immediate termination. Her airline badge was deactivated, her benefits cancelled, and her flight privileges revoked. As security escorted her from the building, she passed by walls lined with the airline's motto about treating everyone with respect, words that now seemed to mock her actions. The airline's public announcement came that afternoon. Standing before a room full of reporters, the CEO didn't just announce Ms. Wilson's termination, he unveiled a complete overhaul of their training programs. "What happened on that flight shows us that we need to do better," he stated firmly. "And we will do better." News of the firing spread quickly across social media. While many celebrated this swift action, others pointed out that this was just the beginning. Civil rights organizations called for industry-wide changes, using this incident as an example of why better oversight was needed. The Flight Attendants Union released a statement supporting the airline's decision. "Our job is to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers," their spokesperson announced. "Any member who fails to uphold these standards has no place in our profession." Ms. Wilson's attempt to appeal her termination backfired spectacularly. More colleagues came forward, sharing incidents they had witnessed but hadn't reported. One flight attendant tearfully described how she had watched Ms. Wilson make a young family feel so uncomfortable they requested to be moved to economy class. The airline's decision to fire Ms. Wilson sent ripples through the entire industry. Other airlines began reviewing their own policies and training programs. Industry magazines and blogs covered the story extensively, using it as a case study in what not to do as a flight attendant. Ms. Wilson's final attempt to defend herself on social media only made things worse. Her post claiming she was just doing her job was met with thousands of responses sharing clips from the viral videos that clearly showed otherwise. Within hours, she deleted all her social media accounts. The story of her firing became a powerful warning about the consequences of discrimination in the modern age. In a world where everyone has a camera and the ability to share their stories instantly, no instance of prejudice could stay hidden for long. But perhaps the most powerful message came from the other passengers on that flight who had stood up against injustice. Their actions showed that one person's prejudice didn't stand a chance against a united stand for what was right. 1 month after the incident, the young boy and his mother returned to the same airport. This time, there were special guests at the airline's announcement of their new inclusion initiative. The mother watched proudly as her son cut the ribbon to open the airline's new training center, dedicated to teaching airline staff about respect and fairness. The airline had gone above and beyond to make things right. They didn't just offer the family free flights. They created a scholarship program in the boy's name for young people interested in aviation careers. "We want to turn a moment of discrimination into a lifetime of opportunities," the airline's CEO announced to enthusiastic applause. The changes weren't just for show. The airline had completely transformed its training program. New employees now spent extra time learning about unconscious bias, and existing staff had to complete monthly workshops. Most importantly, they created a simple way for passengers to report any unfair treatment using their phones. The boy's story had sparked something remarkable. Other airlines started copying these new training programs. Industry magazines wrote about how one brave child and his mother had changed air travel for the better. The attorney who had recorded everything now gave talks at airline conferences about the importance of standing up against discrimination. But the most touching responses came from ordinary people. Letters poured in from all over the country. Parents wrote about how they used the story to teach their children about courage. Flight attendants shared how it had made them think differently about their own actions. Even pilots wrote in, thanking the family for helping make their industry better. The elderly couple who had witnessed everything became close friends with the family. They often met for lunch, talking about how that day had changed all their lives. "You showed us that speaking up matters," they told the boy. "You helped us all be braver." The businessman who had first stood up for them did something special too. His company started a program to help minority students learn about careers in aviation. "Sometimes the worst moments bring out the best changes," he said during the program's launch. Remember the kind flight attendant who had tried to help them? She got promoted to lead the airline's new training program. "We're teaching people that kindness isn't just good service," she explained. "It's about treating everyone with the same respect, no matter who they are." The story even reached schools. Teachers used it to talk about standing up for what's right. Students wrote essays about times they had faced unfair treatment and how they wished they had handled it. The boy's quiet courage had become an example for others to follow. The airline industry magazine did a special issue about changes in air travel. They put the boy's story on the cover, not focusing on the bad parts, but on how it had made flying better for everyone. "Sometimes it takes a child to teach adults the simplest lessons," the article began. Ms. Wilson's story took a different turn. After losing her appeal and her job, she had to face some hard truths. Some say she started volunteering at a community center, finally learning the lessons she had missed. Her story became a warning in training sessions about how bias can hurt careers and lives. The mother used their experience to help others. She started speaking at community meetings, teaching parents how to handle unfair treatment with dignity. "It's not just about standing up for yourself," she would say. "It's about making things better for everyone who comes after you." 1 year later, the boy took another first-class flight. This time, every flight attendant smiled warmly, other passengers chatted friendly, and the journey was filled with kindness. But more importantly, he knew that his story had helped make sure other kids wouldn't have to go through what he did. As for the airline industry, things really did change. New rules made it easier to report problems. Training got better. People became more aware of treating everyone fairly. And it all started because one brave boy stayed calm and dignified in the face of unfairness, showing everyone how to be better humans.